In the world of sports cars, the location of the engine usually has a pretty big impact on price. Specifically, if you want the engine behind you, a mid-engine or a rear-engine sports car usually have to spin into the six figures. We're talking things like a Ferrari, a McLaren, or a Lamborghini. But in recent times, there have been some more reasonably priced sports cars that use that mid-engine layout. Things like Lotuses, a Porsche Boxster, or a Cayman, the Alfa Romeo 4C, and now this car, the 8th generation of the Chevy Corvette, the C8. The C8 went mid-engine, so that's a big change for this American icon. And this recipe is actually quite similar to my Audi R8 RWS. The RWS was the first rear-wheel drive Audi in modern times, and it took the 5.2-liter V10, removed the Quattro, and made it purely rear-wheel drive. So dual clutch transmission, rear-wheel drive only, naturally aspirated mid-engine. The C8, similar recipe, rear-wheel drive only, mid-engine naturally aspirated V8, dual clutch transmission. But there's obviously quite a big price difference between these two cars. And today, after having driven this on the track, on the road, and spending a week with it, and having driven a couple different generations of R8s and purchasing this one, we're gonna talk about, is the R8 actually worth the extra money compared to the C8? The price is going to be the biggest high-level difference in discussion between these two and how you determine whether or not a car is worth it. So for the C8, the base price was $60,000, which you're not gonna really find one for $60,000 because that's like no options whatsoever, so good luck doing that. But this one here is a pretty decently optioned 2LT with the Z51 package. Sticker price is $82,250, so between $80,000 to $85,000 gets you a pretty nicely optioned C8 Stingray. Now, can you make these even more expensive? Absolutely. 3LT, add racing stripes and carbon fiber, you'll easily get this into the 90s, and I was able to option a coupe to $100,000 on the configurator. Where the C8 price gets a little more confusing and difficult to quantify and evaluate is the consideration of market price right now and dealer markups. Due to low supply and really high demand, because this has become a very popular sports car, C8s are trading for between $15,000 to $20,000 over sticker with dealer markup very easily, at which point this becomes a $100,000 to $115,000 car. But for the purpose of this discussion, let's talk about the fact that you can get a C8 for a sticker price. You can find dealers selling them at MSRP, so let's make that comparison this way. For the R8, this is an RWS, which was actually one of the lower priced versions of the Gen 2 V10 R8. By making it rear-wheel drive, even though it's limited, it's actually one of the cheapest ones, starting at just under $140,000. Most of them were optioned to the $150,000 to $155,000 range, but again, this is used. This is a 2018 car, this is a 2021, so used prices for an R8 RWS like this one that I bought, anywhere between $125,000 to $135,000. The Quattro ones and the V10 Plus are going to be more expensive, with used ones going for between $140,000 to $170,000. So let's just call it a $130,000 car versus an $85,000 car. Is the R8 RWS really that much better? So let's start off with the ways that the C8 is better. Technology and creature comforts, by far. Here is a list of all the things that the C8 Stingray has that the R8 does not offer. Heads-up display, cooled seats, heated steering wheel, blind spot warning, front lift. You can't get front axle lift on any R8s. It's never been optioned. You have to either buy the Gallardo or Huracan, the Lamborghini version of this platform, to get front axle lift. The C8 has that to prevent you from scraping your front end. We have a digital rear view mirror on the C8. What else is there? I already mentioned the heads-up display, cooled seats, remote start. You can't get remote start on an R8, but you can on a C8, and these were being driven in the snow. This one actually came to me on winter tires. They swapped them to summer tires because it's nice and warm out right now, fortunately. But that's a big list of tech and creature comforts that the C8 comes with that the R8 doesn't offer, even though this is, let's call it $40,000 extra. Performance, 0 to 60 times. The C8 was insanely optimized for 0 to 60 traction, launch control. This will do 60 in under 3 seconds. That's like McLaren 720S, Porsche 911 Turbo S type of 0 to 60. That's very impressive given that it's 495 horsepower mid-engine naturally aspirated. So that will absolutely demolish this R8. This R8 is actually one of the slowest Gen 2 R8s with the rear-wheel drive. 0 to 60 was rated at 3.7 seconds. So that's not even close, not even remotely close. This has an 8-speed dual clutch transmission. The R8 only has a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. More speeds will allow you to mess with the spacing of the gearing, of the gear ratios, which can help with things like acceleration and also efficiency. Speaking of efficiency, the C8 is much more fuel efficient than the R8. Fuel economy ratings are 15 mpg city, 27 highway, 19 combined versus I think 15 city, 25 highway, and 18 combined? I gotta double check those numbers. But either way, the C8 with cylinder deactivation, it can run in V4 mode on the freeway. This thing will do 30 mpg without even trying. The R8, well, decent for like an exotic of this price point, it can't really do that at all. And the last thing the C8 really has going for it, we already covered at length, is the price. But if you take brand new to brand new, 155 versus 85, that's a $70,000 price difference. That is literally an entire other Corvette in price difference. You could have two of these for the price of one of these. But enough bashing of my poor R8. There are some things the R8 does better. And the one big thing is very, very important. It's critical to the whole sports car experience, the engine. The 5.2-liter V10 in the R8 makes 540 horsepower. That's regular horsepower output. But this motor is shared with R8 V10 Plus, Huracan, Huracan Performante. With mods and a slight tune, you can make this engine make that power level. And even in normal 540 horsepower output, it's a very exciting and charismatic engine. Redline on this is 8,500 RPM. It revs from idle to redline 20% faster than the outgoing 5.2 V10. Idle to redline in 0.66 seconds. That's exciting. In comparison, the LT2, which is derived from the pushrod LT1 found in the C7 Stingray, it's a V8, it only revs to 6,500 RPM. That's 2,000 RPM lower in terms of redline compared to the V10. And that really makes it feel a little more sluggish. I don't want to say boring, but it's just not quite as charismatic or exciting. Objectively, it's a good engine. It makes great power. Like I told you guys, 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. I've tracked the C8 Stingray. It is really capable. 495 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque with the Z51 package, but it misses the emotional appeal that the V10 offers. Something else that you get with the R8. The overall brand prestige and ownership experience will be slightly different. Here's an example. Your R8 needs to go in for service and you get a loaner. You might end up with like an Audi A5 or an A6 or maybe a Q7. If you take your C8 in for service, you might end up in a Chevy Malibu. That's a different thing, right? When you're spending pretty much 6 figures for a sports car, that overall experience is different. Now, Audi is known for making many legendary vehicles, talking about like the Audi Quattro, RS models, RS6, RS5, RS4, RS7. They're great. That's not to discount the brand prestige that Corvette has. Look at the race wins in Le Mans, all sorts of different series. This is an iconic brand too, but I still think there is a delta. Here, Audi is pretty much one of the prestigious luxury brands among BMW, Mercedes, Audi, whereas this ultimately is still a Chevy, and that's a difference. It depends what you're looking for, but for me personally, I'm gonna lean towards Audi with that one. Something else related to the engine I forgot to mention is the sound. Now, this needs an exhaust to make it a bit louder, but even in stock form, it sounds way better than the C8 in my opinion, just a cooler noise to it. Even though I've described the base R8 exhaust as if there was a Huracan or an R8 V10 Plus accelerating like 3 miles distantly in the past. Like you could hear it, but it's not like present there, but it sounds good. And when I put an exhaust on this, it will scream. The C8 makes good noise. On cold start, it's loud, has a muscle car rumble to it, but under throttle, it doesn't do the same things that an R8 V10 with an exhaust will sound like. Interior, the C8 has made huge strides to improve the interior. It's got wireless CarPlay, front cameras. I mean, the quality of materials is great too. We've got Alcantara on the steering wheel, got carbon fiber on the seats. It's really nice. But the R8 still is a little bit better. The materials, the red leather here, the virtual cockpit, the B&O sound system. The C8 has made big strides. The R8 I still prefer, I think is a little bit better, but is the R8 $60,000, $70,000 better from an interior standpoint? No, not even close. So that's kudos to the C8. Call that a tie with maybe a little bit leaning towards the R8. The final thing is driving. How do these two perform? Now, I haven't been able to push my RWS yet because I just bought it, right? The C8 I've tracked before. I've tracked regular R8 V10s, Huracan, so I've gotten kind of that experience, and they're both supremely capable. But I will tell you now, even though The R8s make more horsepower. The C8 is by no means going to get left in the dust. This will keep up with an R8 around a track on a curvy back road without a problem. So I call that a tie, and by verdict of it being a tie, that means the C8 wins because it costs so much less. So you see all of this being added up, and it makes it sound like the verdict is the R8 is absolutely not worth the extra money. And then the question is, why in the world did I spend the extra money to buy an R8? Well, sports car is an emotional experience too. For me, it's an emotional purchase. Is a GT500 faster than my GT350R? Or a Camaro ZL1 1LE faster than my GT350R? Absolutely. But it's the engagement, the enjoyment you get out of the car. And the R8 does that to me. It's been a poster car for me since I'm a kid. I mean, it looks awesome. Massive respect to Chevy with the Corvette. So if you're shopping and you don't have that specific brand loyalty and you want to get a lot of car for your money, a lot of sports car for your money, this C8 checks all the boxes. It does everything so well all year round. Magnetic ride suspension makes it comfortable. It accelerates well. It brakes well. It handles well. For me, though, the final verdict is going to be this. I want to try out the C8 Z06 or whatever high-performance version that comes out. With a more charismatic engine, something a little more exciting, a little more aggressive bodywork, that car is going to make it very, very difficult to justify anything about an R8, because it will objectively and probably quantitatively match the R8 experience for similar or less money and be brand new. So massive thumbs up to Chevy, Corvette, the GM team for developing something like this. I still obviously love my R8. It's just really cool to have these two together, discuss the differences, the similarities, how they compare. To answer the question in the title, is the R8 worth the extra money? Is it that much better? Is it $70,000 better than a C8 Corvette? No, I will tell you guys absolutely not. If you're trying to save the 70 grand and get 95% of the experience, buy a C8 with the Z51 package. If you do want the overall little more exotic look to it, the flair, having an Audi R8, I love this car. I've loved all the generations, driven a bunch of them, happy to own one now. It's a good time to be an automotive enthusiast when we have these kinds of cars to pick from. Make sure you check out the full review I did of this one, updating now that I'm driving in it a year later, the review back when I drove it on the media launch in Las Vegas, the track test of this, and also more R8 videos. Thanks for watching.